Hello everybody and welcome to a new season of Mean Green Game Day. I'm your host Armando Barry and I have some awesome analysts beside me to talk about UNT basketball. On my left I have Michelle Brooks and Rachel Sanders, and on my other side I have Connor Hibbett and Justin Ballou. Guys and gals, the Mean Green men's basketball team has pulled off the best conference start in program history. Right now we are 10-1 in first place in Conference USA. Michelle, I want to start with you. What has been working so well for this team to get to this historic start?
This team just has figured it out, and I know that there was a lot of worry at the end of last season because we lost a big player like Zach Simmons and all that. But Jay Hamlet, I know. But you know what I mean? It's like they have come together so well, and it's almost like a super senior team. It's what it feels like. These guys just have a really good culture. Grant McCaslin has really built a firm foundation. They make the simple plays. They work extremely hard on defense. I love watching this team on defense.
Honestly, it's great to see them on defense. Currently, right now, they're second in scoring defense right behind Texas, who currently has 21. But, I mean, when your defense can create offense for you, it's a great thing, and then scoring off that defense is the best.
And Justin, I want you to tell me a little bit about more. We do have some players that are filling in new roles from Javion Hamlet, Zachary Simmons, James Reese, and all those seniors that left us. Who are the players who have stepped up into those new roles and took in that handoff?
One player I was really excited about was Tylor Perry, the JUCO transfer we got from the national championship team. He was the MVP from that team last season, the best player on the best JUCO team last season. We pick him up, and McCaslin, you could tell in the first few games, was kind of trying to figure out how he wanted to use him. He's been bringing him off the bench in every single game so far this season, and you could tell that he's just stepped into this lineup perfectly. He's leading the team in scoring and minutes and free throw percentage and three-point percentage. So, I mean, he's just been incredible off the bench, and free throws have been one of the things that's really holding this team back. But every time that Tylor Perry goes to the line, he's going to be money. He's just under 90%, and everyone outside of him on this team shoots under 80%. So he's really been the one positive from the free throw line this season. And, as far as this whole season goes, it's just about the culture. Michelle said it. It's about the identity and the culture that we've really built since the beginning of last season. McCaslin, it's all about McCaslin and his coaching. He's coached these guys offensively to move the ball around, get the pick and roll game going, take your time on offense. That's what it's about. Patience and efficiency on offense, and then create those defensive opportunities. And on defense, it's about getting in other teams' faces, getting your hands up, putting pressure on them. And, obviously the second best scoring defense, Rachel mentioned it. It's so much about the slow-paced offense with this defense. It's the second best scoring defense. They're second best in three-point attempts and makes against them. So they're defending the three-point really well, but they're only 41st in defensive efficiency. So it's not that they're this mammoth defensive team. It's just that offense is so slow-paced and so efficient that it's allowing for those defensive opportunities. They are 357th out of 358 D1 teams in tempo. So that really just helps you out. When the other team doesn't have the ball, they can't score, and that's the mentality that we've established and that we're going to keep playing with, and it's been working.
And Abu Osman is another player that stepped up a lot this year for Zachary Simmons, who departed. I think Usman has a higher ceiling, if you ask me, than Simmons did. I think Usman's much more physical on defense. I think his offensive game has a much higher potential later on down the line. He's improving this season. The last few games, he's been putting up double-digit points, and he's gotten several rebounds per game as well so far this season. I like his tenacity, and really, when you have a guy who can play in the middle as tough as Usman can, and he's also very mobile. He can move around the court. He can play at the perimeter pretty well. And like Justin said, we defend the perimeter very well. We defend the three-point line very well. We can contest without fouling, which is something I don't really see a lot throughout the country in college basketball. When guys try to contest threes, they'll typically foul, or they won't even contest them that well, so the guy will have an open shot. LSU, who is actually one of the more aggressive defenses in the country, they leave guys wide open all the time. So that's not very as disciplined defense as what we see with UNT or Texas. Or Houston. So a lot of Texas teams that are up there in defense this year, and UNT is one of them. And we can proudly say, even in a transition season with UNT, that we are, instead of rebuilding, we are reloading, and we have a potential to have a Cinderella story like we did last season.
I'm also so excited about Abu because he lost 60 pounds coming into this offseason, or into this season, and a lot of people were questioning whether or not that would limit what he can do because we have guys like Kenneth Lofton and some other big centers in this conference. But like you said, his athletic ability has really been on full display, and he's been able to get physical with some of these other bigger guys in this conference. I think Zach Simmons last year, his biggest weakness on defense was that he was too stiff on his feet. And Abu Usman, losing that weight really now, is able to move around on defense. Like you said, get out to the perimeter really well. So I'm also really excited about him. He's really taken some steps on offense as well in his game this season. So the sky's the limit for what he can do.
Well, and the development of his game throughout this season has kind of come very quick. He was not playing as physical underneath the post there at the beginning of the season. When we've seen him in the past 2 games especially, Connor, you said it, double digits, 17 points in both games. And the thing is, he's still working. He's lost all that weight, Justin, but he's trying to gain so much more muscle. If you guys ever hear him on the Mean Green Coaches show with Dave Barnett, he was talking about how he's still working to gain another 40 pounds in muscle. And it also shows how much this program invests in their players. I mean, he has grown so much. He looks like a completely different player than he was last year, and he plays like it too. So it's just exciting to see a player like that develop. I mean, Tylor Perry is obviously really big on this team too, but Thomas Bell is who I really want to talk about. He's a key leader. I mean, he has showed up now. He hasn't every single game, but when he does, he knows it's when his team needs it the most. He'll rebound the ball. He was hanging around under the basket the entire game during UTEP. Those are those hard work points. He makes the difference for this team.
I mean, he leads the team in assists, blocks, and all of the important rebounds too. So, I mean, he does the important things that you're not going to necessarily see as points, but those things can all create points. If you look back at the La Tech game, if it wasn't for his rebound and his block that created the Tylor Perry three-pointer, we wouldn't be 10-1 right now. I mean, it's a huge thing. And then we're also 5-0 on the road with Gonzaga, and Gonzaga is the only other team that's also completely perfect on the road, and it's nice to see being up there with teams like that. So it just shows you how much McCaslin has done with this team.
Thomas Bell and Dres McBride were the 2 guys, the only 2 returning starters from last year, and they were really the 2 guys that were going to have to step up offensively, specifically for this team this year. And obviously, guys talked about Thomas Bell. Dres McBride is someone that I've personally been very critical of, but he has stepped up this season big. He used to, in the past, just be a guy, just a 3-point shooter and pretty good on defense. But this season, he's driving more to the lane. He's passing really well. His assist numbers are up. He's finding those looks. He's cutting more now. So I love what's going on with Dres and Thomas Bell. These guys are stepping up great this season.
And a lot of these players, they're getting better because of their experience. And I want to dive into some of those important games they played in. Justin, what's your favorite conference win that we've had so far?
So a lot of big conference wins, but the one that really sticks out is that game at La Tech on the road. This was a game, I was at this game, we never felt like we were going to win it. We were sitting there in the crowd down, 17 points in the second half. We had Tylor Perry on one leg, basically limping around. He had a hamstring and groin injury, had missed a few games before that. So everything just in this game was looking like it was working against UNT in a hostile environment in Ruston, a game that everything was going La Tech's way. They just found a way, and that's what it's about with this team, just finding a way. Tylor Perry, 5 seconds left, hits a huge 3. But credit the team, though. They were able to find a way to get back in that game when everything was looking like it was going towards La Tech, and they were able to pick up a huge road win. They got La Tech again here in a few weeks at home, so let's see if they can get that one too. But that was a huge one on the road.
It's also their second win ever in Ruston after the 2019-2020 season, which is a huge thing just to see these teams be able to win on the road and show that confidence isn't just at home, but it's also on the team, and it doesn't have to worry about the fans being there as much.
Well, especially when you get to this point in the season, because UNT is the team to beat, and every team wants to beat them even more now, whether they're good or bad, and that makes the games even more of a threat. We talked about Tylor Perry having that 6-second 3-point shot to get us that 1-point lead, but Thomas Bell stepped up again too. He had a career-high 29 points, and that's the thing about this team that we were saying. They all know their role on this court. You have J.J. Murray. He doesn't score a lot of points, but he plays defense. He defends better than anyone on that team. In the UTEP game last week, we were playing against some big offensive threats. You have Boom, you have Bieniemy out of OU, and J.J. Murray didn't let up. Ruben Jones stepped up. I mean, the defense on this team is everything. So it's all sides of the ball.
And that game against UTEP, quickly want to say, in that game against UTEP, Tylor Perry did not have his best game of the season, yet we were still able to win that game in kind of an ugly fashion. We started off a little bit slow, but you have a really good team when you have other guys who can step up and play well.
Definitely. And I want to hear real quick, Michelle, who's your MVP for this team so far?
My MVP has been Tylor Perry only because of those clutch games, but it's kind of up in the middle with Thomas Bell just because he continues to show up time and time again. Like you said just now, Connor, Tylor Perry didn't have the greatest game against UTEP, but Thomas Bell, again, stepped up, showed up for his team. So it's up in the air, but these two players are major. Tylor Perry has it because he's coming off the bench. He likes to be that secret weapon and keep people on their toes. And come on, that 1-point or 3-pointer that got them over the top.
And the best thing about Tylor Perry is that even when he's having a bad game, he still finds a way to make an impact. And especially coming off the bench, that's huge. That anytime he comes in the game, you know he's going to provide that spark, and he has that ability. So that's huge. Even when he's having a bad game, you can still rely on it.
Definitely, Justin. We can all agree that this team is heading in the right direction. But the next thing we're going to dive into next is this women's team. We'll dive into their season when we come back. Thanks for staying with us on Mean Green Game Day. We are about to dive into the UNT women's basketball team season so far, which has been quite the roller coaster. They're currently 5-6 in conference and 11-10 overall. They're now on a 3-game win streak after beating UAB and UTSA on the road and Rice at home last night. But Michelle, I want to start with you. Why has it been such a struggle for them to get and stay above 500?
This team just can't find a rhythm. Offensively and defensively, they have their moments, but they just can't find that rhythm. No one is stepped up consistently every single game. You have a key player like Quincy Noble, but she's not always effective offensively. She's gone through some shooting slumps, so that's some tough times. But also, it's losing a key player like Nia Boyd. Okay, she left, and they're struggling without her. I mean, they need some help.
I mean, honestly, I can't disagree. There's games where you've seen Amber Dixon try and step in that role. There's games where you've seen Gomez try and do that as well. But the problem is none of the girls can play consistently and be able to keep together on both offense and defense. And then even if someone is struggling, they keep trying to go for the same thing. And it's just not happening. That's when you got to find other people, find other plays, find something.
This team just struggles to read the floor in general, I think, a lot of the time, and we saw that last night in the Rice game at the beginning of the game. They kept trying to feed Maddie Townley on the inside, and Rice would get the hand on the ball every single time, but it was like, we just want to run this play. Well, you have to read the defense, and Rice knew that they could win or play very well against a struggling UNT offense in a 2-3 zone, and that's what they did for most of the game.
And sometimes it seems like the UNT women's basketball team is too decisive on offense. They settle into what they see at first, and they don't react to when the defense changes. Like when Rice, last night, when they switched to the zone defense, a lot of the UNT players, they didn't really move like I would have liked to have seen them. They didn't really attack the holes in the zone as much as I would have liked to see. They started doing that more in the second half. They were more effective, especially at the beginning of that third quarter. They caught Rice off guard. They had to call an early timeout to start the second half. But if UNT read the defense a little bit more, perhaps they could have a little bit more efficiency on offense given the struggles from the three-point line especially.
I think it's incredible that this team is over 500 total record, just given everything that's happened this season. I think everything that's gone on this season is to no fault of their own with this team. If we look at their schedule since December 17th when they lost to Wichita State, which was, for the men, the Wichita State game was really where they turned their season around. For the women, this was where everything started going wrong. After that Wichita State game, they were scheduled to play at Oklahoma State, the game where Quincy Noble is going to go against Nia Boyd. That game gets postponed. So they're like, okay, let's go down to Waco and play number 10 Baylor. That sounds like a great idea. So they go 12 days between games right there between the Wichita State and the Baylor game. And then after the Baylor game, they lost by 20 points in that game. They had their first 2 conference games postponed against Rice and UAB. So they didn't even start conference play until January 9th against Middle Tennessee, who, by the way, is one of the best teams in Conference USA. So, I mean, they go from playing Wichita State, then they go 12 days off. You play number 10 Baylor, then you go 11 days and you play the best team in conference on the road, Middle Tennessee. So it's like by the time they even got into conference play, they were just trying to get their feet back under them with everything that's been happening. And none of this was their own fault. And then they had the rescheduled game against UAB. They had three road games in 5 days. I mean, that is really tough. And credit them for winning 2 of those games.
Well, that's the thing about this team, Justin, is they are all about momentum. Everything. It's like if they lose a game on the road, there's a good chance that the next 2 games that they have on the road, because they keep getting stuck in these situations of postponements, they are probably going to lose them. So this past last week when they were finally able to come up after they lost to UTEP and defeat UAB and UTSA is very enlightening, but when they're down, it is hard to get them out of that slump, and that's what it's been this entire season. And no fault of their own, you're talking about those postponements. None of those postponements were on UNT. They were all other teams. So it's hard to get going. But once you do get going, you have to stay with it. We were talking about how they finally got set on offense, and they could break that 2-3 zone here and there last night. But they would break it once, and then they wouldn't run the same play for another 10 minutes. So it was like, where is the basketball IQ here from the coaching side of things too? Why aren't these girls being told, go and do that again?
Basketball is a streaky game. like in one particular game, you'll have a team go on a 10-0 run, and another team will respond with an 8-0 run. But it's different when you have a game or games on your schedule when you're losing 3 in a row and then winning 3 in a row. That's not the way it's supposed to happen. But unfortunately, that's the way it has been so far for the women.
So now I
Another
want
thing
to
for the women is that they just haven't been wanting to score. Anyone who has the ball, they just pass. They just pass. Last night you saw this pass going over and over and over, and it was killing me because like these passes should have been easily turned over, and they were not good.
I agree with you. It's too many passes, and then they get a look at the rim, and then they just miss it. It's too many easy layups, and then they get the offensive rebound, and they go up and miss again. It's just too many easy missed shots. I like the passing. They're creating good looks. They're just not making them from there.
So I want to dive more into a point that you brought up, Michelle. You said, why isn't the coaching telling them, if something's working, let's do it again? No one likes to play the blame game, but if you had to, who are we pointing the finger at? What's been missing from this team?
I don't want to play the blame game
No, we're
too
gonna play
hard
it.
on this team right now. I think that they are kind of young. Okay, you have Ali Gamez, who is a good player, and she came from Fresno State, and she has a lot of potential, but then she was out a couple games with the back injury, so you can't expect her to come in here full throttle. Now, she looked great last night. She wasn't hitting a whole lot of shots, but the hustle was there. The coaching staff just has to find a way to get it through these girls' heads that they have to figure out how to work together on defense and offense, because there's just no kind of system here.
You know what? I brought this up last semester during the football game day, and I'm going to bring this up only once because I don't want to hit the same point over and over again. But UNT is a young team, and this is a season where you got a lot of experienced players with the COVID year and the super seniors. Do you think that has a little bit of an effect?
Well, I mean, we should be seeing, we have seen a step up from Quincy Noble. She is a leader for this team, but when she goes through these slumps, the rest of the team can't step up. So I think it's kind of like, if we are going to play the blame game here, I blame it on everyone on the team, including the coaching staff, because no one can figure anything out, and it's like, well, why? Why?
Okay, so let's go to the positive side on this one. There are some players that have had a little bit of good moments. I want to talk about Rachel. Who has been the shining light in your eyes?
I would say the shining light on this team is Jazion Jackson. She's been there all year. And their loss at UTEP, she had 19 points, 2 assists, a rebound, and a steal. And I mean, she's been there all year. She's tried doing things. She's been trying to at least lead this team. She hasn't always been perfect, but she's been out there. And that's something you ought to give to a player, especially when this team isn't doing well with the barely over 500.
We've seen a lot of consistency out of Jazz this season, and we've seen a lot of good things out of all the players on this team. And when they do win games, they've been big, important games. I think the one thing before I let go of this one topic is that when you play teams that are not as good as you sometimes start to stoop down to their level. And I think that's kind of what happened last night especially. And I think that's what happened with all of the players individually. You just don't play as well when you're playing competition that isn't as good. I know that shouldn't be the case, and if this was a basketball team that had it a little bit more figured out, they would have blown out Rice last night. But that being said, Jazz Jackson again showed up last night for this team. She has around 10 points per game, and she makes the difference. She hustles. She's probably one of the best defenders on this team. She gets at least 2 steals a game, and she is just that backup, extra, on-the-ground, nitty-gritty, hard worker player on this team that you need that picks up the slack for everyone else.
Okay, so Jazion Jackson seems to be the common name on this side. Y'all agree with that?
I would say Ali Gamez, the Fresno State transfer. She's kind of provided a spark for this team. She's kind of that vocal leader. She doesn't say a lot, but you can tell that the girls kind of rally around her. She's consistently put up double-digit points all season to go along with Quincy Noble, which is really big. That was one of the problems last year, was that it was Quincy Noble always, and that no one else could really do the scoring. But Gamez, pretty consistently throughout the year, has been a double-digit scorer. She's averaging 10.5 points a game, over 5 rebounds, and shoots at it well at 40% from the floor. And you mentioned the back injury. She did miss 2 games, but she returned for that 3-game road trip and has been playing pretty good since then. Has stepped back into the lineup, has looked pretty good. So I would say Ali Gamez outside of the obvious Quincy Noble choice.
And I would have to agree with Justin. I'm going to go with Ali Gamez as well. In the day and age of the transfer portal, it's really important to get those key pieces for your team, especially in years of transition. And that's what the women's team has done with Ali Gamez. And I think down the stretch, especially as Gamez gets healthier, she can provide a spark for the women's team.
Definitely. I agree you guys with Ali Gamez. I think her play just doesn't really show on the stat sheet. She's efficient, she's a scrappy defender, and she gets the ball moving. There are a lot of times where he said that they couldn't get in that zone, but when Ali Gamez was the main playmaker, she got it into the comfortable spots for the players. I feel like UNT has a lot of players to where they have to get the ball to them in certain spots. Like Maddie Townley, she has that patented elbow jumper, and a lot of her Townley's highlights came from Ali Gomez.
What makes Ali Gomez an especially good player is she's small and she uses her height to her advantage. You said she was attacking the zone really well and she was finding the seams, and that is a smart player. So at least a good leader to have on this team as a transfer.
I think how I would sum up this women's team is that they have a bunch of good individual players, but they don't play great as a unit. And with the men's team, it's really you have a bunch of good players and they play well as a unit. With this women's team, that part of the chemistry and just playing together on a nightly basis is really the part that they need to work on. But they have a lot of good scorers, a lot of girls that are averaging over double-digit points. They just got to put it all together on a nightly basis and start winning games that way.
Absolutely. We're taking on the rest of the NCAA when we come back. Stick around. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. I'm your host, Armando Barry, and I'm here with Michelle Brooks, Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Justin Ballou. We're going to dive into some of these Power 5 teams. We're going to start off with the Big Ten. Justin, you're passionate about this one. Who's your pick to win the Big Ten and why?
Well, the Big Ten is definitely the most top-heavy conference in all of college basketball. You've got teams like Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Michigan State all up there at the top, all really national title contenders. And if they weren't in the same conference, these would probably all be top 10 teams. Now, I'm going to take Wisconsin to go on and win the Big Ten tournament and win the outright Big Ten title. I think this is a dangerous team the rest of the regular season and into the tournament as they normally are. They have a Player of the Year candidate in Johnny Davis. They have as good of a resume as any other team in the country. Listen to this. There are 8-4 in Quad 1 games, which is as most wins against Quad 1 teams as any other team in the country has. They're 3-0 against Quad 2, and they're 4-0 against Quad 3s. And they have a really favorable schedule down the stretch. So they have a really great chance to boost that record and boost that resume the rest of the regular season. And some of these other teams like Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State all play each other, and they're going to be beating each other up, while Wisconsin's playing teams like Rutgers and Minnesota down the stretch of the season. So I like Wisconsin to ultimately get the 1 seed and then win the tournament from there.
I agree with Justin. I think Wisconsin's going to finish out on top for the Big Ten for the regular season, but for the conference championship, I think the Purdue Boilermakers are going to win that. Down the stretch, when you get into late February into March, I love teams with elite guard play and have really good chemistry with each other. That's why I loved UNT last year when they started to play better at the end of the season, and that's why I like Purdue in the Big Ten this season. To me, they are the most explosive, one of the most explosive teams in the country, and certainly the most explosive team in the Big Ten, and I think they'll be turning it on at that point in the season.
Connor, I agree with you on Purdue. They're kind of a sneaky team is what I'm kind of looking at them as right now. I mean, they have Ivy. He's averaging 16.9 points per game. He's 50% from the field goal, but they also have 7'4", 295-pound sophomore Edie, and he's averaging 14.6 points per game, and it's not just all right there in the paint around the basket. I mean, he can shoot the 10-footer, and he's a threat, and he's a big guy. He can take some guys down. I think Purdue is just one of those sneaky teams that's going to make that run, like you say, Connor.
I like Wisconsin, actually. Johnny Davis leads their team with 20.8 points per game. They've really been killing it. They've beaten Michigan State. They've beaten Purdue. They've beaten Illinois. The only difficult game for them now is Purdue at home. But I think if they do win that game, they get the 1 seed. They end up winning the tournament. My only worry is last year when you saw the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament, they went down, every one of them. So it kind of depends on if they're able to let that 1 seed go to the head or not.
I think getting the 1 seed for the Big Ten is going to be huge because the rest of the teams are going to have to play each other if you're not the 1 seed. So whoever gets the 1 seed in the Big Ten, I think specifically will go on to win it.
And UNT beat Purdue last season.
I know, it's crazy.
How about that, man? But yeah, Purdue is such a really good team. A few years ago, they were really close to beating Virginia, who ended up winning the national championship that season. So Purdue should not be slept on at all.
All right, now, Connor, I want to dive into more of the Big 12. There's a lot of good teams out there, Kansas, Baylor. Who's your pick of that litter?
I'm going to go with Kansas. It's kind of hard not to bet against them right now. They had that disappointing loss to Kentucky at home, which, by the way, was shocking. If you think about Bill Self, the head coach for Kansas, if you think about over his tenure at Kansas, he hardly ever loses at home, much less by a lot like Kentucky beat them. I think Kansas, since that point, has started to figure things out even to a bigger degree. I think they're going to be really difficult to beat. And if you remember, the Big 12 tournaments played in Kansas City, so that's almost home court advantage for them.
That's what I love about college basketball, Connor, and I'm glad that you said that, is because Kentucky went in there and beat Kansas at home. And I have Kansas winning right here in the Big 12. But that's what's so exciting about college basketball is Kentucky's a good team, and they go in there and they win that game. And it spices things up. It's that time in the season though where these games are everything. And I said it, about UNT. These teams are the teams to beat. But I do have Kansas as well. I think historically too, under Bill Self, you see them every year. They're one of those teams.
And at this time of the season, like I stressed earlier in this segment, teams who always start playing well towards those last few weeks in the season are teams you have to watch for. Even if they don't win their conference tournament, especially if they get a bid into the NCAA tournament, they're a team to watch for. And another team in the Big 12 that's playing very well right now, they've won 4 of the last 5 games, is Texas. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, they play tremendous defense.
The Big 12 is just a gauntlet of conference. I mean, we mentioned a few teams already. We have Baylor, Texas Tech, Kansas as really the national title contenders, and Texas is probably somewhere in the conversation as well. This is, I think, the hardest conference to predict because these teams play each other every game. You have Iowa State now under 500 in the conference, who was just ranked a few weeks back. I mean, this is just insane. It's really hard to pick Baylor to win anything based off how they've been playing, but I think ultimately Baylor's going to win this conference. I think they got their struggles out of the way early enough in the season to where they can go back, watch that film, and get all those mistakes corrected by the time they get into the stretch run of the season. And I think they have a little something to prove now after this losing streak. They're still the defending national champions from last year, and I think they're like, hey, we're still here. We know the Big 12 is great, but we're going to go into March Madness with a big seed after winning this conference, and we're going to defend that title. So I think Baylor's coming in with something to prove for this tournament.
And Iowa State was one of the last remaining teams to be unbeaten, and now they're below 500 in the Big 12. Tells you how good that conference is.
See, my problem right now with Baylor is when they don't have a Kingio out there, they're a completely different team. They're not able to set up things like they used to. So my thing right now is with the tournament being in Kansas being who they are, Bill Self being who he is, I got to go with Kansas. It's really hard to say that without them not being in Kansas City.
I'm going to side with Justin on this, not just because they're my home team, but hey, Coach Drew is still there. We still have a couple players from that winning team last year, and I think we have that winning pedigree. We're recruiting even more better players to Waco, so I'm going with Baylor.
The thing about this Big 12, though, right now in general is it's that time in the season. I mean, you saw Texas Tech get upset by Oklahoma this week, so I really feel like it could go up in the air.
We haven't even talked about Texas Tech, and they're one of the better teams in the country, too. So, yeah, that's just a gauntlet of the conference.
Let's go out west and go to the Pac-12. Rachel, what's your pick out of that litter?
I got to go with Arizona. I know it's probably not everyone's favorite, but currently they've beaten UCLA and they've beaten USC. The hardest thing, though, for Arizona right now is that they've got a 3-game on the road with Utah, Colorado, and USC. But I think if they're able to pull those out, they end up getting the 1 seed. They end up pulling off the tournament. With it being in Las Vegas, no one really gets the home advantage, so I'm going to go with Arizona.
See, I'm going to go the complete opposite of you right now. I'm going to go with UCLA. I mean, we're seeing these two teams right now in this conference, and we just saw UCLA kind of lose to Arizona a week or two ago, and it was just a sloppy performance by UCLA. I'm going to say they are a bad team or worse than Arizona because of that, because I think that they could be a lot better. They lost to Auburn, but they lost to Auburn at home. I think these losses are just not something to hold too much water to. I'm going to go with UCLA.
This is the first time we have 3 really strong Pac-12 teams in a long time. I mean, you guys mentioned Arizona, UCLA. USC's up there too, and they're really good last year. I'm going to pick UCLA too. I think this is a really experienced team. Last year, bringing back almost their entire starting lineup from the Final Four, including Johnny Juzang. They're both they're top 20 in both offensive and defensive efficiency this year. Now, they did have that rough road trip to Arizona last week, losing at Arizona and then to ASU. But again, I think this is something where they're struggling early enough in the seasons where they can go back and correct those mistakes. And Arizona's a pretty young team, so I don't really trust them yet. And I think in the tournament, and especially in like a Pac-12 tournament where you have UCLA and maybe going against an Arizona team that's a little less experienced, in a championship game, I'm going to have to favor UCLA in that.
I'm going to go with Arizona. To me, they're just one of the best teams in the country all around. They got beat by UCLA the first time they faced them. Now, Arizona was off that night, and yet it's like UCLA still couldn't pull away. They were just staying ahead because Arizona was having an off night, but Arizona's a legit team.
Okay, and Justin, I want to go back to you for this new conference, the SEC. Kentucky's still there. Who's your pick out of that group?
Well, Auburn all of a sudden has become a basketball school. I mean, how about this? Give all of the credit in the world to Bruce Pearl because he has been there for 8+ years, and fans were calling for his job a few years ago. He said, I'm going to stick with this program. I'm going to slowly build up this recruiting, build up this team, and look at where they're at now. They've been number 1 in the country. They just lost to Arkansas, but they're 22-2. They have as good of a resume as anyone in the country. They have 7 Quad 1 wins, 5-0 against Quad 2, 6-0 against Quad 3. That is a really impressive resume. saying. They'll probably end up on the 1 seed or 2 seed line for the tournament, even if they don't win the SEC. But, Kentucky's in this conference. That's going to be really tough. Kentucky-Auburn played a couple times already, so good matchup there. But I think Auburn, Jabari Smith is now in conversation to be one of the top picks in the NBA draft. Auburn just has so much to offer. Their fan base is going crazy now for this team. Bruce Pearl, now everyone's bought into what he's building, so I like Auburn here.
Yeah, with the football program where it's at right now, they're a basketball school. All of a sudden, imagine telling an Auburn fan that just a decade ago after winning a national championship. Yep. Auburn is a really good team. Obviously, they've been number one for a while until their loss to Arkansas a couple nights ago. I'm going to go with Kentucky. To me, right now, they are playing the best basketball in the country. I think they are the team to beat as of right now. I'm going to go with the Wildcats to find a way to win not only the regular season, but also the conference tournament.
Connor, I'm going to have to agree with you on that statement 100% because at the end of the day, it's Kentucky. So you want to see them every year in the conference tournament. You want to see them in March Madness, and you're probably going to. But the thing is, they did have that loss at Auburn, which Auburn's a threat, but it was at Auburn, and it was only by 9 points, and they just upset Kansas by how much? 18 points in Kansas?
And keep in mind, Kentucky, when they lost a few games earlier on in the season, they had a lot of injuries. When they lost to LSU, they lost to Auburn, but they have those guys back now. So
that's what I'm saying. Like, you're seeing this team finally get this rhythm in this full roster, and they're a big threat. I mean, especially when you're finding it so soon to this end of the season when you're going into this big run.
Absolutely. We're going back to the CUSA to break down that conference as a whole, and we'll see who spoke too soon when we come back. Doesn't it feel good when someone says that you can't do something, but you do it anyway? Well, that's essentially what this segment is about. I'm all for the pettiness, so I'm excited to get into some of these preseason poll rankings. Justin, let's get straight into it. I want to start with Western Kentucky on the women's side. In the preseason, they were expected to be they were ranked as number 12, but now they're at third. What happened that just miscalculated from the preseason so far?
They are at third. I'm still a little bit unsure what to make of this Western team. They have a senior from Egypt named Maral Abdul-Gawad that's top 20 in the nation. She averages 19.8 points a game and shoots 54% from the field. Now, this is a Western team that in their conference opener scored 98 points against Southern Miss, and then went on to win their next 7 conference games by an average of 15 points. But then after that, they went on to lose 3 games to UAB, Middle Tennessee State, and Charlotte back-to-back. So they've kind of been all over the place. They do have a good score, so I'm still kind of unsure just where this team is at. Third in the division right now. That East Division for women's is pretty strong, so going to have to see where Western ends up at the end of this.
98 points is a lot of points, but Rachel, I want to hand this one off to you now with Southern Miss. They were 13th, second to last, expected to be preseason, but now they're up there, the top half of the standings at number 5.
I mean, Southern Miss is a very different team. They're right now 7-5 in conference. They have 3 incredible transfers. Leading them is Dominique Davis. She is from LSU. She currently leads them with 15.5 points. This team was predicted to be very low. They have a lot of young players, but they only allow opponents to have 64.2 points a game. And for that, you got to give it to these girls for at least coming together and making this season somewhat of a good season.
Dominique Davis is a key player to that offense especially. I mean, she is everywhere on that floor. She can shoot the ball, she can drive, and she can pass. I mean, she's a versatile player. She makes a big difference for the Southern Miss offense. And
another team that you were very passionate about before the show was Marshall. What do you have to say about that?
So it's kind of interesting because Marshall is sitting basically where they were expected. They were expected at 9 and they're at 8, but it's really a key offensive player on their team that I want to talk about is Savannah Wheeler. I mean, she's averaging nearly 30 points per game, and she is an all-around player, and she's what's brought a few key games together for Marshall. They just haven't found a rhythm. UNT especially did a really good job of holding her to under 10 points. So I just think it's kind of interesting where Marshall is sitting because I think they have an offensive, component that could make them a really good team, but they just haven't done much with it.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not really any one particular team. This is bulletin board material for y'all if you want to listen up on this one. This is what I have to say about preseason polls for these coming seasons in whatever sport it may be, coming off of what we all went through a year ago, and we all know what that means. COVID disproportionately impacted teams and programs in any sport a season ago, which gave a lot of people false representations of teams, because sometimes you would have multiple players out with contact tracing, and by the end of the season, some teams would play more games than others. Some teams would have their schedules whacked around. Sometimes you wouldn't have more than 1 or 2 nights of film to get ready for a team. And then again, the contact tracing, you wouldn't have a lot of players available. So the final record for teams last year, in whatever sport it may be, was probably not the true representation of how either good or bad those teams were. And I think that's why we have seen in so many preseason polls for a lot of sports why they're kind of all wacky.
And with that being said, Connor, I want to switch over to the men's side and ask you which one of these standings sticks out the most to you that's just, besides all the COVID stuff that happened, was just blatantly wrong?
I think, let's talk about UNT. They were projected 6th in the preseason, and right now they're 1st. I think this just goes to say how awesome of a coach McCasland is to be able to, in a transition season, not only make us kind of hold steady, but in some ways even look better than where we were a season ago. I mean, you talk about guys like Abu Osman, Tylor Perry. These guys are coming in and as new starters, if you will, they've been able to not only pick up where we left off last year, but even have a higher ceiling. I mean, Tylor Perry is a really good guard. Abu Osman is so physical, both offensively and defensively. And like I said earlier in the show, his offense keeps improving. The ceiling for UNT basketball just keeps getting higher and higher. And it's so awesome to say that UNT is a basketball school, and I'm a student at that university, and we've been a Cinderella story in the nation the last couple of years.
I think you make a good point about that. I mean, we've seen players develop, and it says a lot, especially Aaron Scott. I mean, he's a freshman that's come in and played quite a few games now. He hasn't had the best 2 past games. You can tell he's getting in his head. But to see him come off the bench and play some minutes says a lot when you only have your 5 returners, Tylor Perry, and just a small amount of other guys contributing aside from that. So I think that's a big thing. But for me, the team to talk about is UTEP. I mean, they were projected at 10, and they're sitting at 6, but I think it's just because they're in the West. I mean, if they were in the East, they'd be leading, and they are a threat. A lot of these schools today, especially, are leaving Conference USA and heading, to the AAC or who knows yet. And UTEP's going to be standing here in this conference alone. I think it's their time, especially with new coach Joe Golding, to build that legacy that they have always been known for. I mean, they're a school under Don Haskins, Billy Gillespie, and they have a lot of great players. Bieniemy, I was talking about him earlier, out of OU, Sully Boom, and they're all-around players. So I think UTEP is one of those teams I'm excited to see moving forward into the next couple seasons. They have a lot of potential.
So I know that Marshall was really high on this list. They were 4th. They're now 13th. But you can't actually look at, they are 1-10 conference, but the one thing about them is that a lot of these games they've lost are really close games. So I'm saying that they are a bad team, but they're so close to being a good team. They have these chances. Like Thursday, they lost by 1 point against FIU. Their biggest problem though is turnovers. If they could lower those turnovers from 13.6 down to at least like less than 10, they could be someone to watch out for, at least in the East, with them being so terrible, and just maybe someone to watch out for even in the conference tournament.
And with that conference tournament coming soon, I want to go to you. Out of these middle teams right here, who do you think really needs to get in position in order to avoid the good teams in that tournament?
Well, one team I think we still need to look out for is Western Kentucky. Now, I know that they were projected to be really good this season, coming into conference up at number...
Second, maybe?
Third in the preseason rankings. Now they're all the way down at number 9. I mean, this has been a season of struggles for Western. They've won 3 straight games now, and in this weak East Division on the men's side, they're only 2.5 games out of first place, and they've still got games against UTSA, Southern Miss, twice against Marshall. So look out for this Western team. Now I know they lost a lot last season. They lose Tavian Hollingsworth, they lose Charles Bassey, 2 of their best players. So they have a lot of new guys on this team, but very well coached. A team that's been around, been there, done that in the tournament. So watch out for Western, not only in the rest of the regular season, but if they get into the tournament, or when they get into the CUSA tournament, watch out for them to make some noise. They're coming.
And they're in the East Division, and so it's going to be a little bit easier to have a path to get to that last couple of games for the conference tournament. And like Justin said, they're an incredibly talented team, and when a team has been there, done that, as like Justin said, you can never count a team out like that. When you kind of just put them by the wayside and forget about them, that's when they come up, and that's when everyone's like, oh, of course, Western Kentucky does it again, right? They're a team to really watch out for the next few weeks.
And Michelle, I have a question for you. Going back to the girls' side this time. Right now, our women's team, we're 11-10, we're above 500. We have another chance to get a win against a Rice team that is not as talented as the other teams. How important is it for us right now to really take advantage of our schedule so we can have good position for the CUSA tournament coming in?
Well, here's the thing. If you look at the women's upcoming schedule, you have Rice at Rice, you have FAU at home, UAB at home, you're at Southern Miss, a team you've already beat, you're at Louisiana Tech, you have UTSA, and then you have a UTEP team that has beat you. So our end of season schedule, the strength gets a lot less. And so here is the time for UNT to capitalize, because if they can win these games that they should win, then they are going to be well on their way in good position for the Conference USA tournament. So this season is definitely still salvageable for the Mean Green. They just have to figure it out. Now, last night they won. It wasn't a great win, but the chance to see Rice again on Sunday, I think, says a lot, because they can build off what they were struggling verbatim and go and put it to work against the same offensive or defensive set, that 2-3 zone that they struggled so much against, and hopefully finally find some rhythm and grow as a team and, work a system.
I'd say, last night you saw the bench really have a lot of production. They had 24 points versus Rice's 1, and that'll also be key to going into the rest of the season.
Absolutely. And speaking of those Mean Green, both our men's and women's team will be playing on the hardwood again this weekend. We'll have your preview and predictions when we come back. Back to Mean Green Game Day. I'm your host, Armando Barry, and I have Connor Hibbett, Justin Ballou on this side, Michelle Brooks, Rachel Sanders on this side. Connor, I want to go to you on this one. Right now, we have a couple games ahead of us on both sides of men's and women's this weekend, but right now, I want to start with the women's. After defeating Rice at home last night, 57-50, the Mean Green, they're going to play them again in a second game for that series this Sunday, but it's going to be in Houston. What are some specific things that they need to key in on if they want to pull off their 4th win in a row?
Well, fortunately, in last night's games, Rice started off very slow, and UNT did as well, but because at least UNT scored a little bit in the first quarter, we were able to sustain a lead, which we kept for the rest of the game. However, I don't know if they can withstand that, or if they can have a similar type of contest again. There's a couple really, really good players for Rice that were just a little bit off to begin the game, but they started to play better as the game went along. And I can tell by the way they shot the ball with their form that they're good shooters. They're streaky shooters, but when they are on, I don't think UNT can keep up with them. We don't know about UNT's offense this year. But Maya Bukanevich and Haley Sways. Now, Sways didn't score a whole lot, but Haley has one of the most purest forms I've seen. She shoots the ball at the top of her flight. It's hard to block her shot because she gets so high off the floor, and she's got such a quick release. And Bukanevich started hitting some threes in the latter part of the game. I don't know if UNT can play a similar type of game and win again, but Destiny Jackson for Rice is also a very good player. She is so fast in transition, but fortunately UNT was able to contain her a little bit with Quincy Noble's really good defense. But
right.
I don't know if we can withstand again that low success on offense and win, especially on the road.
Right, we have to be protective offensively. That's number one for this Mean Green team. Defensively, Quincy Noble really did play good defense against Destiny Jackson last night, because she is one of those wild ball players that's kind of going to run you over down the court when she drives that lane. She's not afraid. And Quincy did a really good job of keeping her hands off her, only got called for an arm bar once or twice. Great job. Now, the thing is about this Rice game is they are coming off an upset at UTEP. Okay, they defeated UTEP 72-69. Maya Bukanevich had 5 threes. That was all of her 15 points. So she is streaky, and if she's hot, she's hot. So this Rice team has a lot of potential to play well. UNT just lost to UTEP. That's my fear for the Mean Green now. Rice is going home, at home, and the Mean Green are coming in. They didn't play fantastic last night. They have a lot that they need to work on, specifically an offensive scheme and working it in and out, and not making those cross-court passes. That was one thing last night that really, I think, hurt the Mean Green. They had a bunch of turnovers just off of bad passes, and you can't do that, especially in a 2-3 zone. It's basic basketball.
Another thing to look at in this game is we got to see Madison Townley on her 124th appearance. She got to have a great game. She had to have 13 points, lead the team, and her and Malia Fisher were having a rebound fight for rebounds. Malia ended up winning with 10, and
No, but I definitely think that you're right with a lot of those players. I think another player that I want to point out is definitely Ali Gomez. With a lot of Townley's points, they were handed to her from Ali Gomez, and I think she facilitated a lot of the playmaking yesterday. I think a lot of her play was really contagious because not only did she make the pass, but a lot of times she'll make that rocket pass through the zone, and another person will get open, draw a defender, and they'll make another pass down low that gets the easy bucket.
And it's all about the ball movement for this team. I mean, when they make those 1, 2, 3 extra passes, that's when they find that good shot. It's when they come down the court and rush a quick shot, bad shot, and lose the ball. They don't go for the rebound, and they are known to rebound well, but when they rush the ball like they do most of the time, they're not getting after it.
I think the goal for this women's game is to have a clean group effort type game. We mentioned the slow start, the slow finish, letting Rice get back in that game at the end of the game. I want to see a clean group effort on both sides of the ball, get out to that lead early and kind of sustain it throughout the game. And I want to see this offense kind of settle down, get into some of that rhythm, start making those passes into that zone a little bit nicer.
And I think we're going to have to do that if we want to win again, because I don't see Rice shooting as cold as they did in that first quarter throughout a big length of the game, enough for UNT to sustain a lead, because we're going to have to play much better offensively.
And they're ready. I mean, Maya Bukinovic came down in this right out of halftime, hit 2 threes back-to-back, no look. It's all about that form. You're right, Haley Swayze, they didn't fall last night, but you can tell the form is there. And these girls are going to be at home where they're used to shooting. They're 75% from the free throw line, so they're confident shooters. They just need to be more in their element.
Another thing I'd like to see from the Mean Green is them going to Demisha Lampkin and doing more points in the paint. Maybe the other shots weren't hitting last night, but I know that they had 26 points in the paint, which is crucial when you're trying to at least do it. And even if you don't get the points, you can at least see if you can get a foul or get some free throws, because I know the UNT girls have a excellent shooting on the line, and I'd like to see that more.
I actually wanted to see some more shooting from one of their sharpshooters, Magruder. I just feel like every time she makes a shot, the team, they cheer a little bit louder, the crowd gets more into it. And I think she's a very streaky shooter. She had a big game, I think 2 games ago. I think it was against UTSA or somebody.
I love Kendall Magruder. I'm really glad you brought up Kendall Magruder, because she's young, she's new to this team. And so we don't see a whole lot of her on the court. We are playing a lot of returners, and there's not a lot of rotation. But when she does come on the court, you know that she can shoot the ball. She's another one of those players that has great form. At SMU, she had 5 threes. Last night she came in, she only played about 4 to 5 minutes, but she came in, hit 2 threes for her team when they needed it. That's a good player that can come in and be there.
Okay. Now, what are your final predictions for this game, real quick?
Okay, well, I have UNT because I think that they have the momentum coming. I just think that they're really going to have to be effective. If they don't come out of this game strong to start, then Rice is going to have it from the get-go.
I think UNT as well. As long as they win the first half or even the first quarter, they're putting themselves in good contention. And even maybe if they could keep finishing games and have a good fourth quarter, I'd give it to UNT, but it'd be really close.
I think Rice gets off to a quick start, never looks back. I think UNT puts up a valiant effort, but comes up just short.
Yep, Rice bounces back.
I'm going to break the tiebreaker, and I'm going to go with UNT. I'm not just going to be a homer, but I think that they're actually going to capitalize on some of their mistakes they made last game and move on. And speaking of moving on, I want to go to the men's side, where we go against a Rice team that is middle of the pack, 14-9 right now, and they're fighting for position for that CSA tournament as well. What do you see as the important factors that we need to look at for that game?
I think the biggest thing is don't look ahead. I mean, you can't ever look ahead, obviously, against any opponent. But when you have Florida Atlantic on the road afterwards, this just, to me, it seems like a kind of a trap game. A couple years ago when UNT had a really good team right before COVID hit, Rice beat them on the road, and Rice could not miss in that game, I remember. And I'm hoping it's not a similar type of game. We're obviously a better team than what we were back then, but that was kind of the start of the dynasty. And I don't want to have a realization back to that, a memorization back to that game with this weekend's game against Rice. So hopefully UNT can not look ahead in this game.
Yeah, this is the biggest 3-game stretch of the season at Rice, at FAU, and at UAB. All road games, all 3 really tough road games. But this Rice team has been a team that North Texas historically has been able to score against and has some success against. UNT has won 8 out of the last 9 games and have scored 74 more points in each of those games. So I think the key to the game is just keep the pressure on the Owls. Don't start looking ahead. Just keep doing the same schematic things that you have been doing. You know, this was a blowout back on January 1st when they first played here in Denton. So just keep that same pressure on the Owls that you have been doing. Like I said, this is a team that we have consistently been able to score against. So just don't look ahead either.
It may be like a game like Southern Miss where we don't win convincingly, but we do enough
just
to win.
Get in and get out. That's that type of game.
Yeah.
Well, as Grant McCaslin always says, it's all about those simple sets. So I am expecting to see a lot of that out of these guys this weekend. I am really excited to see Abu Usman come out again and play another game. I'm expecting UNT to work the ball inside and play that inside game because that's really what's been working these last 3 games. And we've seen a lot from Thomas Bell too. So I think that we have a lot to grow on. I'm excited for UNT to play Rice. I think they definitely have the win here. This is that time in the season, though, when teams get upset. So you're right, Connor and Justin, they can't look too far ahead.
My thing with Rice is they're looking for revenge. We beat them by 30 points at least. I mean, we killed them. They're going to want revenge. They're at home. They have the home court advantage. So the one thing that UNT can't do is they can't give up on themselves, which is something they've been good at not doing on the road. I expect them to do that again and keep themselves up and keep the momentum and going to the paint with Abu and the other players as well.
Yeah, you guys mentioned Abu Usman. That's the matchup to watch. Abu versus Max Fiedler for Rice, because Max Fiedler's really tall, but he doesn't have that size that Abu does. And we saw when they played the first time, Abu was really getting physical with him down in the paint. He was getting frustrated. So watch for that matchup again. And one other guy for Rice, watch out for Quincy Olivari. This guy's coming in hot. He's got really quick feet. He's really fast, and he's a streaky shooter. He averages just under 10 points a game for the season, but his last 4 games, he's averaging 13.5 points a game. He's made 50% of his field goal attempts and 41% of his three-point attempts. So this is kind of their Energizer Bunny type guy. He's the guy that will come in, make some threes, and get the team going. So look out for how UNT guards him. I expect to see J.J. Murray a lot on Olivari.
And I want to see how Tylor Perry bounces back as well. He probably had one of his worst games against UTEP, but this is a really good opportunity for him to bounce back before we have a really good 2-game stretch, or a really important 2-game stretch against Florida Atlantic and UAB on the road, because we're going to need Tylor Perry to be the Perry that we saw in moments against Louisiana Tech to be able to win those key road games down the stretch.
And he said he's feeling better too, so he should be 100% now going into these games. So just get in and get out of Rice. That's the goal.
Definitely. I like how you brought up the big man battle with Usman, but I think one important player that we should look at is Mardrez McBride. I know he's had his up and downs a little bit, but over the past 6 games, he's averaged 13 points per game on 52% from the field and 50% from 3. I remember the UNT basketball tour, they put out a tweet that he was like a man on a mission, and he's looking great. He's living up to his nickname, Mardrez McBride, and I'm excited to see if he can keep this going on further and further as we go into the more difficult part of our season.
And that's exactly right. The narrative with him used to be that he only played well in big games, but this season it's every single night he's stepping up. And again, like I said, I've been someone who's been critical of him for just being a 3-point shooter, but he has really been huge this year, and especially over this last few weeks.
Well, and you can tell he's just having fun with it. I mean, did y'all see him boom it last week? That was cold when he went off, and then he was just shooting from the 3 splash every time. He's playing his best basketball right now, and you can see it.
It will be interesting to see him and Carl Pierre and who gets the more crucial 3 and who makes a big difference and gives us the energy that the team needs. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind.
Definitely. Well, that concludes this episode of Mean Green Game Day. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure to come back and watch us next Friday at 3. See you next time.